What is up, Super Coaches? It is your Super Coach sister, aka Ebony, back with another installment of the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to NRL SuperCoach. So, if you're new to the channel, my name is Ebony. I've been slowly starting to help brand new players get the hang of SuperCoach as I'm personally fresh off my rookie season and basically making videos that I wish I had available to me 12 months ago. So, if you're new here, make sure you check out any of the other relevant episodes. But today's video is all about TLT. So even that may seem foreign to you, but it is simply an acronym for what we call Team List Tuesday. Because every Tuesday at 4 p.m. up on the NRL website, teams designate who has been selected in their squads to play for the upcoming round. And it's a pretty important time to be aware of in terms of who will be playing from your SuperCoach squad. So why don't you join me today as we learn a few things about TLT. Let's go. All right, so as we get started, the first thing to note is I'm going to be exploring some of the way that teams are listed on Team List Tuesday on the NRL.com website. But if you actually never bothered to go through in great detail what it has on there, the SuperCoach app or the webpage actually does give us some very helpful indicators at a glance as soon as these team lists have been published on a Tuesday afternoon. So if we start out on the SuperCoach page, we will see every player often has these little coloured indicators. So if the players that belong in your SuperCoach team have been named and are expected to play in the upcoming round, they will have a nice simple green tick sitting on their player card profile. So of course, in the opposite, we would be looking for some other colours. If we have a red and white stripe, it means your player is injured, which is probably going to affect their opportunity to play. This could also include players who have been put on HIA protocol, or of course players suffering from an injury. Then we have players who have the red strike through symbol here. This is a player who has been suspended for a time due to something that's gone on in a previous match. Then we have the hollow red circle. So this is suggesting that your SuperCoach player has not been named in even the starting squad or the bench. So you can't expect them to be playing in the upcoming round. Perhaps they've been relegated to cup. And then we have the orange little symbol with the exclamation mark. This is suggesting that your player has been named as part of the squad, but has specifically been placed on the bench. Lastly, the blue. This is simply your team is on a bye round. So it is very important that we take stock of our team and how many bye round players we have, because of course we cannot start them if we want to gain some points from them. So we've got to make sure we put them on the bench and not listed as one of our reserves. So if we want the very basic information of whether or not our players are involved in the upcoming round, we don't need to specifically head to NRL.com because all of the team list info that is provided on TLT does get converted into these symbols and indicators on the SuperCoach website or app. So if this is all you want to know and need to know, you can go ahead and log off here. You could still actually if that's cool. But for those who would like to know some of the nitty gritty that we can extract from team lists on TLT, then let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like on NRL.com. So we'll see here, first and foremost, the matchups are placed in chronological order. So whoever's playing first in the week, their team lists will be placed side by side in opposition to one another to indicate that their game is first. And so it goes for the rest of the round. Now, a couple of super important things that Team List Tuesday does actually help us to understand in terms of the point scoring potential of our players in our SuperCoach team. So first and foremost, obviously we want to see, is the player that we have selected in our SuperCoach team playing in the position that they typically do? Because this would potentially affect whether or not they'll score as much as we would typically expect. So I remember for part of the season last year, for example, Stephen Crichton had to move from his typical centre role to fill in the fullback. And whilst they kind of provided him a little bit of a hybrid attacking opportunity, it certainly meant that he may be affected by the fact that he's playing out of position to score differently. That's also true of players who maybe play on a particular edge, left or right, and if for whatever reason that week they've been switched to the other side, for whatever reasons, changing things like combinations can obviously affect a player. The other thing that is really super helpful is us figuring out whether not just our player is playing in their usual expected position, but are there any other players in their squad who have either changed positions or needed to move that might still further impact our player. So a classic example here from the 25 season is that Scotty Drinkwater as a fullback would more than often go on an absolute tear. He, from memory, turned up or got more than 100 points at least 5 or 6 times perhaps over the course of the season, which is a lot in SuperCoach terms. But one thing that was noticed was that any time that Jackson Purdue was placed away from the center role and actually into the halves in some description, it actually impacted Scotty Drinkwater's involvement in attack. So Scotty scored way less in the weeks where Purdue was in the halves as opposed to when Purdue was back in the centers. So when we're paying attention to the info provided in our team lists, we want to not just look at where our player is playing, but whether any of their teammates perhaps have different roles or positions for that week and whether that could have an impact. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how would I know if that's going to affect or impact? To be honest, last year I just learnt by keeping my finger on the pulse and following along with some other frequent content providers on Instagram or YouTube, and just learnt along the way of the patterns and trends that they would often point out. So super grateful for the people that know a lot more than I do. So the other thing to pay attention to is, of course, the actual matchup. So who are our SuperCoach players going up against in this round? If, for example, I have a fullback locked in from a top 4 team. So let's say last year I was playing Ryan Pappenhausen in my fullback role, and that week Melbourne are playing a bottom of the ladder type team. So whether it was maybe last year the Titans or the Tigers, or at one point, of course, poor Rabbitohs who were affected by injury. So if I know that the player I have in my SuperCoach team belongs to a high quality, winning team, and they're coming up against perhaps a little bit of a weaker opponent, then I can be certain in terms of making sure I start that player, or at least place one of the reserve armbands on them on the bench. That is probably a helpful segue in terms of this is the time after Team List Tuesday for us to consider who out of our current bench players are we going to select as one of our 4 reserves. So as we can see here, we only ever have 12 players in total on the bench, and every week 4 of them need to be one of our reserves. So when we're weighing up out of, say, my 3 center wings, who of these players should I start versus sit, which is a common term we'll hear, then this is where looking at these matchups and who's playing who can be super helpful. And it doesn't have to be as simple as a good team is playing a bad team. It can even be more individual than that. So if I have a reserve center wing who usually plays on the right edge, and I know, for example, they're going to be running up against a left edge defender who's known to struggle a little bit, then that could help really weigh up my decision. So paying attention to the matchups, both on a team level, but then on an individual level, can really elevate our game in terms of maximizing the points that we accumulate across our squad for the round. Lastly, in terms of the bench, now it could be a little bit more different this year with the brand new 6-man bench rule, but one thing just to keep an eye out for is your forwards rotation and how many forwards we have listed on the bench. So if you can see that, you might be putting up a 2RF that you want to play, but when you actually take a look at their team list and how many other people could play, say, on their edge, or if they're a middle player, just keeping in mind, will this affect their minutes? If I can see how many bench players are likely to be there to offer my player rest, then perhaps their minutes are going down from a normal week. So, again, in terms of these finite details, this might be a little bit too advanced for a beginner's course, so to speak, but these are definitely things that towards the end of the season last year, I was grateful to start understanding and learning. So, I figured it's at least helpful to give you guys a head start if you want to dig deeper into these ideas. So there we are, guys. A quick little overview of TLT, or Team List Tuesday, and its importance in terms of who we select in playing round after round in SuperCoach. Not only that, just a quick note, I mostly talked about how it helps us to select things like sit versus starts, but Team List Tuesday also can be the point at which we figure out, do I need to be trading any particular players out if I know that they're now injured for a long time? Or do I need to be trading any players in because of the matchups that I can see that they get in the coming rounds? So, hope this has been helpful. If it has, I would love you to pop a little like button down there for me. And if you are new to the channel and haven't yet subscribed, that'd be awesome too. But catch us next time for the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to SuperCoach.